I have rather mixed feelings about the WWF Attitude video game that graced the PlayStation and Dreamcast consoles. It's a game that had some nice looking textures and sound production, but its inane demands to remember dozens upon dozens of button combinations to perform even the simplest of wrestling maneuvers often left me wanting to play something else instead, and it certainly soured me to any other game sharing this sort of gameplay philosophy. So I was pleasantly surprised to learn that WWF Attitude for Game Boy Color, courtesy of Acclaim Entertainment and Crawfish Interactive, was less that style of play on the consoles and more of a, let's say, an old school game from the LGN days on Super Nintendo and Genesis, where you have a punch button and an interact button that serves as a grapple button, a climb the rope button, and a tag button, and then you mash buttons to escape a pinfall, and you play log roll to avoid ground attacks, and then you let the computer beat you in looping grapples that get you trapped, and that's worth 2 stars right there. I guess, I suppose. Also, I hope you dig that jazzy background tune in the background, cause that's all you're getting throughout the whole game. Oh yeah, that oozes attitude right there, doesn't it? You do have the option of disabling the music if it gets to you, but the remaining sound effects aren't that much better alone, so whatever. Got the sound out of the way, let's move on. Attitude gives you 20 WWF Superstars of the time, including Steve Austin, The Rock, Undertaker, Kane, Mankind, Mr. Ass, Godfather, and others, as well as the game's sole female competitor, Sable. Yeah, just Sable. Okay, well, whatever. Sorry, China. You have multiple modes of play, a challenge mode where you beat everyone to win the WWF Championship as well as fend off any grudge matches along the way, the career mode where you beat everyone to win the championship without the grudge match in sight, an 8-man King of the Ring tournament mode, and a versus mode where you could have a single match. You also have tag team action and a steel cage match where you climb up to the top of the cage to win the match, and for those challenge and career bits, you have passwords to resume your progress at a later time, and you can also customize your button mapping if you wanted to, but personally the default setup works just fine, such as it is. The action is straightforward. You have a punch button to execute, well, punches, and an interact button to perform a variety of functions, mostly grappling with your opponent, but also to climb the turnbuckles for insane high-risk maneuvers, to tag your partner during tag matches, and to climb the cage in steel cage matches, among other things. Each wrestler has a health meter that starts off at full green, but drains as damage is eventually sustained. Once the meter empties, the wrestler is stunned, during which a stun meter, a blue bar, will pop up and gradually drain until it empties, leaving you with a full meter of health of a different shade of color, and this continues until your meter hits the red, the weakest level of health. While stunned, you can perform a move to knock your opponent off his feet and go for the winning pinfall. It's worth noting that because cage matches do not end in pinfalls, you have to escape the cage, the stun meter is omitted from this mode entirely. Underneath your health meter is a little red dot, and when that dot turns yellow, that's when you could perform your signature move, which is done by pressing attack as well as a special button at the same time when in the appropriate position. The dot will also flash to indicate you have your opponent in a grapple, which allows you to perform a bunch of moves like Irish whips, suplexes, and atomic drops. All the wrestlers pretty much play the same way and have the same set of basic moves. Only thing that's different is their signature moves, so really it's a matter of taste. The gameplay is a mixed bag of promising premise and wonky execution. On the surface, you try to interact with your opponent to get a grapple on and you do moves. Sometimes you'll need to punch, keep punch, maybe do a move and hope you can initiate a pinfall when he's down, and hope he doesn't do a move on you, because then you'll be doing nothing but log rolls, mashing every button to try and get up while your opponent climbs to the turnbuckle on one end of the ring and nails you all the way to the other side with an aerial attack. It's actually quite depressing, to be honest with you. Now, to be fair, the game isn't totally unplayable. Controls for the most part do somewhat function, though pinning sometimes isn't the most responsive or perhaps intuitive thing, despite being a one-button affair. Tagging in, climbing things, timing your grapples, and trying to pull off a move, they do work for the most part, but the AI is a nagging thing where you're either stun it with punches until its health is down to 0, or you try and play normally, only for the computer to nail you with move after move and sometimes be locked in this back grapple mechanic that's difficult to escape because the timing is just quick even on the easiest of settings. I don't know. Attitude feels like something that could have worked, but lacks that little bit of polish to make it really worthwhile. Like I said, it's entirely playable, and nagging issues with the AI aside, it is indeed conquerable. There's a training mode so you could practice your moves, as well as biographies of the various superstars, so that's something, I guess. In terms of the graphics, well, the portraits aren't too shabby. The audience in the background has a nice gradient effect to it, even if there's a bit too many empty seats, especially for that era of the WWF. And the way the WWF logo animates into the title screen is a rather neat effect, I think. As for the wrestlers themselves, they look passable enough that you could kinda sorta tell them apart. Kane is probably the only character who looks distinct enough that he looks like the actual Kane. Honestly, you could say that this is The Undertaker, but he looks like Roman Reigns. You could say that this is Stone Cold, but he looks like Goldberg. And you could say this is Gangrel, but he looks like Mordecai. Nobody is going to get that. Overall, WWF Attitude on Game Boy Color is a thing that happened. Now, to be fair, I had somewhat low expectations going into this, and what I got was a game that was, at the very least, semi-playable and passably presentable. I've played wrestling games on the Game Boy that barely qualify on both counts. However, wonky AI and a somewhat bland experience keeps Attitude from reaching any semblance of heights. As a whole, if you really need a WWF Attitude fix on Game Boy Color, I'd recommend just getting WrestleMania 2000. It's a much better game in comparison, and has the one thing that Attitude lacks: you get to beat the shit out of Mr. McMahon. And quite frankly, given the quality of WWE television these past few years, I'll take that over a game featuring Sable any day of the week. I mean, seriously, why didn't you put China in there instead? At least she tussled with the boys, but whatever. Who cares? Bye.